The rain battered Portland streets. A relentless drumbeat against my office window. But inside, the silence was louder. Ethan Parker, my newest patient, sat across from me, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor like it held the secrets to his soul. I'd seen that look before, defiance masking a wound too deep to name. I'm Dr. Liam Carter, a therapist in my early 30s, and I've spent years helping people untangle their hearts in this city of gray skies and hidden dreams. Portland's eclectic pulse, its coffee shops, its bridges, its quiet rebellion suits me. But Ethan, with his guarded hazel eyes and a leather jacket that seemed to carry the weight of his past, was different. He didn't want to be here. You don't have to talk today, I said, leaning forward, my voice soft but steady. But you're here for a reason. Ethan, what is it? He scoffed, crossing his arms. Court ordered. DUI. My lawyer says I need to process my issues, or whatever. His tone dripped with sarcasm, but his fingers twitched, betraying him. I nodded, jotting a note. Okay. So, you're here because you have to be. But what's the real reason you're sitting on that couch? His eyes flicked up, sharp and searching, like he was testing me. You think you can fix me, Doc? Good luck. I'm not one of your success stories. I smiled, unfazed. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to listen. And maybe, if you let me, we'll figure out what's worth fixing together. Ethan's story unraveled slowly that first session, like a thread pulled from a tightly wound spool. He was 25, a mechanic with a knack for fixing engines, but not himself. He'd grown up in a small Oregon town, where being openly bisexual meant whispers, glares, and worse. His father, a pastor, had called his identity a sin. His mother had stayed silent. Ethan had left home at 17, carrying nothing but a backpack and a heart full of scars. Portland was his escape, but it hadn't been kind. He worked long hours at a garage, drank too much, and drove too fast, chasing something he couldn't name. The DUI was just the latest consequence. I don't need your pity, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. I'm fine. I don't pity you, I replied. I'm curious. You're carrying a lot. What's it like to hold all that alone? He didn't answer, but his shoulders softened. Just a fraction. That was enough for day one. Over the next few weeks, Ethan showed up reluctantly at first, then with a grudging consistency. He'd slump onto the couch, always in that same leather jacket, and we'd talk. Or rather, I'd ask questions, and he'd deflect with sharp wit or brooding silence. But I noticed things, the way his eyes lingered on the pride flag in my office, the way he'd fidget when I asked about his relationships. You ever been in love? I asked one rainy afternoon, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He froze, his gaze darting to the window. Love's a trap, he muttered. People say they love you, then they leave. Or worse, they stay and make you wish they'd left. I leaned back, letting his words settle. Sounds like you've been hurt. He laughed. Bitter. Hurt. Nah, Doc. I'm bulletproof. But his voice cracked. And for a moment, I saw the boy beneath the armor, a boy who'd loved and lost, who'd built walls to keep the pain out. I didn't push. Instead, I shared a story of my own, a rare move for me. When I was your age, I said, I thought love was a fairy tale too. I came out as gay in college. And my first boyfriend, he broke my heart. Took me years to trust again. Ethan's eyes met mine. Surprised. You. Mr. Perfect therapist. I chuckled. Not perfect. Just human. Something shifted after that. Ethan started opening up. Bit by bit. He told me about his first love. A boy named Caleb from high school. They'd kissed behind the bleachers. Hearts racing. Until Caleb's parents found out and sent him away. Ethan had never heard from him again. That's when I learned. Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Love doesn't last. Not for someone like me. I wanted to argue. To tell him he was wrong. But I held back. He wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. By the end of our fourth session, I noticed something new. Ethan was looking at me differently. Not just as a therapist, but as someone he was starting to trust. It scared me because I didn't trust him, but because I felt something too. A pull. A warmth. I pushed it down, reminding myself of the boundaries that define my role. But Ethan's vulnerability, his raw honesty, was breaking through my carefully built walls. One evening, as the rain slowed to a drizzle, Ethan lingered after our session. Why do you do this, Liam? He asked, using my first name for the first time. Why do you care? I hesitated, searching for the right words. Because everyone deserves to be seen. Ethan. Really seen. And I think, maybe you've been invisible for too long. He stared at me, his eyes bright with something unspoken. Then he grabbed his jacket and left without a word, leaving me with a racing heart and a question I wasn't ready to answer. Was I falling for my patient? The weeks bled into months, and Ethan became a fixture in my office, like the rain that never quite left Portland's skies. Each session peeled back another layer of his defenses, revealing a man who was equal parts fire and fragility. But with every step closer, I felt the line between therapist and something more blur. A dangerous dance I didn't know how to stop. Ethan started sharing more about his life in Portland. He lived in a cramped apartment above the garage where he worked, surrounded by tools and the smell of motor oil. He'd made friends, a ragtag group of misfits who frequented a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor. But he kept them at arm's length, just like everyone else. I don't let people in, he admitted one day, his voice rough. Easier that way. No one gets hurt. I nodded, scribbling a note to hide the ache in my chest. But does it work? Keeping everyone out. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Keeps me safe. Safe, I echoed, but lonely. He didn't answer, just stared at the pride flag on my shelf. I wondered what he saw in Ethiop. or a reminder of everything he'd lost. One session, he surprised me by bringing up Caleb again. I looked him up last night. Ethan said, his voice unsteady. He's married now. Some girl in Idaho. Got a kid. I watched him closely, noting the way his hands trembled. How does that make you feel? Like I was just a phase. He spat. Like I didn't matter. You mattered to him. Ethan. Even if it didn't last. You still matter. He shook his head, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time, he was starting to believe he might be worth something. Our sessions weren't just about his past anymore. Ethan started asking about mess-mall things at first, like my favorite coffee shop or why I'd chosen Portland. I kept my answers vague, professional, but he was relentless, chipping away at my armor with that disarming grin. You're not like other shrinks, he said one day, leaning back on the couch. You actually give a damn. I laughed, caught off guard. I hope so. It's kind of the job. Nah, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. It's more than that. You see me. My breath caught. He was right, I did see him. Not just the patient, but the man. The way his laugh lit up the room. The way his vulnerability made my heart ache. I was crossing a line, and I knew it. That night, I stayed late in my office, staring at the notes from our session. My training screamed at me to refer Ethan to another therapist, to protect us both. But my heart, me stupid, reckless heart, wanted to keep him close. The next session, Ethan walked in with a new energy, like he'd made a decision. I want to try something, he said, his voice firm. I want to. I don't know. Live. Really live. Not just survive. I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. What does that look like for you? He hesitated, then said, I want to stop running. From myself. From people. His eyes met mine, and I felt the weight of his words. From you. The air in the room shifted, heavy with unspoken possibilities. I should have redirected, set a boundary, but instead, I said, I'm here. Ethan. I'm not going anywhere. It was a mistake, and I knew at the moment the words left my mouth. But it was also the truth. Over the next few weeks, our sessions grew more intense. Ethan talked about his dreams opening his own garage, maybe even leaving Portland someday. He started smiling more, his sarcasm giving way to hope. But with every smile, every lingering glance, the pull between us grew stronger. One evening, as we wrapped up, Ethan stood to leave but paused at the door. Liam, he said, his voice soft. Can I ask you something personal? I swallowed, knowing I should say no. Go ahead. Do you ever feel like you're not allowed to want what you want? The question hit me like a punch. I wanted to tell him yes, that I was fighting the same battle, that every time he walked into my office, I felt something I wasn't supposed to feel. But I couldn't. Sometimes, I said carefully. But part of life is figuring out what's worth fighting for. He nodded, his eyes searching mine. And then he was gone, leaving me with a heart full of questions and a growing fear that I was in too deep. The Portland rain had a way of making everything feel heavier. And as winter settled in, so did the weight of my feelings for Ethan. Our sessions were no longer just therapy, they were a tightrope walk between duty and desire. I told myself I could handle it. But every time Ethan's eyes met mine, I felt the ground shift beneath me. He was changing, though. The man who'd once slumped onto my couch with a scowl now sat up straighter, his hazel eyes brighter. He'd started taking steps, small ones, but real. He'd cut back on drinking, joined a local art class to channel his restless energy. He even brought me a sketch one day, a pencil drawing of a motorcycle under a stormy sky. "It's not much," he said, handing it to me. His cheeks flushed. "Just something I did." "It's incredible," I said, tracing the lines with my finger. "You've got talent, Ethan." He shrugged, but I saw the pride in his eyes. For the first time, he was letting himself believe in something good. Our conversations deepened, too. He talked about his father's rejection, the way it had shaped his view of love. I used to think if I could just be enough, maybe he'd accept me. But I was never enough. "You are enough," I said, my voice firm. "You always were." He looked at me, his expression raw. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I do." That session ended with a silence that felt alive. Electric. I knew I was treading dangerous ground, but I couldn't pull back. Not when Ethan was finally starting to heal. One rainy afternoon, he walked in with a confession. "I went on a date last week," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes watching me closely. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face neutral. "How was it?" He shrugged. "Fine. Guy was nice. But it didn't feel right." "Why not?" I asked, my heart pounding. He leaned forward, his voice low. "Because he wasn't you." The words hung in the air, a confession and a challenge. I froze, my training screaming at me to shut this down, to protect us both. But my heart wanted to reach across the space between us and pull him close. "Ethan," I said, my voice barely steady. "We can't. You know that." "Why not?" He pressed, his eyes fierce. "Because I'm your patient. Or because you're scared?" "Both," I admitted, the honesty cutting through me. "I'm your therapist. There are rules. Ethics. I could lose my license." "And what about what you want?" he asked, his voice breaking. "What about what I want?" I didn't have an answer. Not one that wouldn't break us both. The rest of the session was a blur. I redirected, focused on his progress. But the air was thick with what we hadn't said. When he left, I sat in my office for hours, staring at the rain. I needed to refer him to another therapist. It was the right thing to do. But the thought of losing him, of not seeing him every week, felt like losing a piece of myself. The next session, Ethan was quieter, more guarded. I hated it. Hated the distance I'd put between us. But I had to be the professional, the one who held the line. Let's talk about your goals, I said, forcing a neutral tone. What do you want for yourself? Long term. He looked at me, his eyes searching. I want to be happy, Liam. Really happy. And I think you're part of that. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to reach for him. Ethan, I care about you. More than I should. But it's not possible. Not like this. He nodded, but the hurt in his eyes was a knife to my chest. So, what? I just keep coming here, pretending I don't feel what I feel. No, I said softly. You don't pretend. You keep being honest. And we figure out how to move forward. But moving forward felt impossible when every part of me wanted to pull him close and never let go. Winter in Portland was relentless, the rain turning to sleet, mirroring the storm inside me. Ethan's confession had cracked something open, and no amount of professional detachment could close it. I was falling for him, and every session was a battle to keep my feelings in check. Ethan, meanwhile, was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. He'd started volunteering at a local LGBTQ+ youth center, sharing his story with kids who reminded him of his younger self. It feels good, he told me one day, his smile genuine. Like I'm making a difference. You are, I said, my pride in him spilling over. You're showing them they're not alone. He looked at me, his eyes soft. That's what you do for me, Liam. I swallowed, redirecting the conversation to safer ground. But it was getting harder to ignore the truth. Ethan wasn't just my patient anymore. He was the person I thought about when I woke up, the one whose laugh haunted my dreams. One evening, he showed up late, his hair damp from the rain, his expression unreadable. I need to tell you something, he said, sitting down. I braced myself. Go ahead. I'm done with therapy, he said, his voice steady. Not because I don't need it, but because I can't keep sitting here, pretending I don't love you. The word love hit me like a tidal wave. I opened my mouth to respond, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, he said. I know it's messed up. I know you could get in trouble. But I'm not your patient anymore, Liam. I'm just a guy who's in love with you. And I think you feel it too. My heart pounded. Every rule I'd ever learned screaming at me to stop this, to send him away. But he was right, I did feel it. I'd felt it for months. Ethan, I said, my voice shaking. If we do this, it changes everything. I could lose my career. You could get hurt. I'm already hurting, he said, his eyes locked on mine. And I'd rather hurt with you than be safe without you. I stood, pacing the room, trying to think clearly. But all I could see was Ethan's courage, his vulnerability, his heart laid bare. I need time, I said finally. I need to figure this out. He nodded, standing to leave. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But as the door closed behind him, I knew I was already gone lost in a love I wasn't supposed to have. The next few weeks were agony. I consulted with my supervisor, who urged me to refer Ethan immediately. I drafted the referral letter, but I couldn't send it. Instead, I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the ache. Ethan didn't come back to therapy, but he didn't disappear either. He texted me one night. A simple message, meet me at the Rusty Anchor. No pressure. Just talk. I shouldn't have gone. But I did. The bar was crowded, filled with laughter and the clink of glasses. Ethan was at a corner table, nursing a soda, his leather jacket slung over the chair. When he saw me, his face lit up, and I knew I was in trouble. You came, he said, his voice warm. I shouldn't have, I admitted, sitting across from him. But I'm here. We talked for hours about his art, his dreams, the kids at the youth center. For the first time, we weren't therapists and patient. We were just Liam and Ethan, two people trying to find their way. As the night ended, he reached for my hand across the table. I'm not giving up on us, he said. Not unless you tell me to. I squeezed his hand, my heart racing. I don't want you to. It was the closest I'd come to admitting the truth. But it was enough for now. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. Meeting Ethan at the Rusty Anchor had shattered the last of my professional boundaries. But it also felt like the first honest moment of my life. I was terrified and alive in a way I hadn't been in years. I didn't see Ethan in my office anymore. But we texted, met for coffee, walked along the Willamette River under Portland's gray skies. Each moment with him was a risk, a step further from the safety of my old life. I told myself we were just friends, that I could keep this under control. But my heart knew better. One night, he invited me to his apartment above the garage. It was small, cluttered with tools and sketches. But it felt like him raw, real, unpolished. He'd cooked dinner-burnt pasta and a lopsided salad, but the effort made me smile. You're not as smooth as you think you are, I teased, taking a bite of the slightly charred spaghetti. He grinned, leaning back in his chair. Hey, I'm trying. Give me some credit. We laughed, the tension easing. But as the night wore on, the air grew heavy with unspoken words. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. Liam, he said, his voice low. I'm not good at this. But I want you in my life. Not as my therapist. As more. My breath caught. I wanted to say yes, to let go of the fear and the rules and just be with him. But the weight of my career, my ethics, held me back. I want that too, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know how to do this without hurting you. He leaned closer, his eyes fierce. Then let's figure it out. Together. Before I could respond, he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, then deeper, like he was pouring every unspoken feeling into it. I kissed him back, my heart racing, the world falling away. When we pulled apart, I was trembling. Ethan, this could ruin me. He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. Or it could save us both. I didn't stay the night. I couldn't, not yet. But as I drove home through the rain, I knew I was done fighting it. I was in love with Ethan Parker, and no amount of logic could change that. The next day, I met with my supervisor and told her everything. She was kind but firm. I had to stop seeing Ethan, professionally and personally, or risk my license. I nodded, promising to do the right thing, but my heart was elsewhere. I referred Ethan to another therapist, a colleague I trusted. It was the hardest email I'd ever written, each word a reminder of the line I'd crossed. But when I told Ethan, he didn't flinch. Good, he said, his eyes steady. Now we're just us. No rules. No walls. But there were still walls mine. I was scared, not just of losing my career, but of what it meant to love someone like Ethan. Someone who'd been hurt so deeply he might not know how to trust. We kept seeing each other, stealing moments between my sessions and his shifts at the garage. We'd meet at coffee shops, share quiet dinners, walk through Portland's parks as spring began to bloom. Each moment felt like a gift, but also a reminder of the risk we were taking. One evening, as we sat on a bench by the river, Ethan turned to me, his expression serious. What are we doing, Liam? Are we just pretending this can last? I took his hand, my heart pounding. I don't know, but I wanted to. He smiled, but there was a shadow in his eyes. I've lost people before. I can't lose you too. You won't. I promised, even as fear gnawed at me. I didn't know how to keep that promise, but I knew I'd fight for it. Spring in Portland brought color to the city cherry blossoms. Green hills. A fleeting warmth that made everything feel possible. But with Ethan, possibility came with a price. Our relationship was a secret, hidden in stolen moments, and the weight of it was starting to show. We were careful, meeting in quiet corners of the city, avoiding places where colleagues might see us. But every touch, every kiss, felt like a rebellion against the rules I'd built my life around. I was falling deeper, and so was Ethan, but the fear of being caught loomed over us. One night, at a small art show where Ethan's sketches were displayed, I saw him in a new light. He was nervous, his hands shoved in his pockets. But when people praised his work, his smile was radiant. I stood in the background, watching him shine, my heart swelling with pride. You're amazing, I told him later, as we walked through the city, the night air cool against our skin. He laughed, nudging my shoulder. You're biased. Maybe, I said, stopping to face him. But I mean it. You're becoming the person you were always meant to be. His eyes softened, and he kissed me, right there on the street, unafraid. For a moment, I let myself forget the risks, the rules, the world outside us. But the world didn't forget. A week later, a colleague saw us at a cafe, holding hands across the table. She didn't say anything, but her raised eyebrow was enough. By the next day, whispers were circulating at the clinic. My supervisor called me in. "Liam, I warned you," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "You need to end this, or I'll have to report you to the board." I nodded, my throat tight. I understand. But I didn't end it. I couldn't. Instead, I told Ethan everything, expecting him to pull away, to protect himself. But he didn't. "Then we fight," he said, his voice fierce. "I'm not letting you go because of some stupid rules." "It's not just rules," I said, my voice breaking. "It's my career, Ethan. Everything I've worked for." He took my hands, his eyes blazing. "And what about what we've built? Doesn't that matter?" It did. More than I could say. But the fear was real, and it was tearing me apart. We kept going, but the strain was undeniable. Ethan started pulling back, not out of anger, but fear. He was scared of losing me, just as I was scared of losing him. Our conversations grew tense, our touches hesitant. One night, he showed up at my apartment, his eyes red-rimmed. "I can't keep doing this," he said, his voice raw. "Hiding. Pretending. It's killing me." I pulled him inside, my heart breaking. "What do you want to do?" "I want to be with you," he said, tears spilling over. "But I need you to choose me. Liam. Really choose me." I held him, my own tears falling. "I'm trying. I swear I am." But trying wasn't enough, and we both knew it. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and a note. "I need time. I'm sorry." Ethan was gone, and the silence he left behind was louder than any rain Portland could muster. The days without Ethan were a blur of gray. Portland's spring felt hollow, the cherry blossoms mocking me with their fleeting beauty. I threw myself into work, taking on extra clients, staying late at the clinic. But nothing filled the void he'd left. I kept his sketch of the motorcycle on my desk, a reminder of what we'd had and what I'd lost. I wanted to reach out, to beg him to come back, but I didn't. He needed space, and I needed to figure out what I was willing to risk for him. A month later, I saw him at the youth center, leading a workshop for teens. He didn't see me, but I watched from the doorway, my heart aching at the sight of him alive, vibrant, helping others the way I'd helped him. He was healing, even without me. I left before he noticed. But that night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living half a life, torn between duty and love. I loved Ethan, and that was worth fighting for. I wrote a letter to the licensing board, explaining everything my relationship with Ethan, my breach of ethics, My commitment to making it right. I offered to surrender my license voluntarily, to spare them the trouble of an investigation. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it felt like freedom. Then I went to find Ethan. He was at the garage, working late, his hands stained with grease. When he saw me, his expression hardened, but his eyes betrayed him hope, fear, love, all tangled together. "I'm done hiding," I said, my voice steady. "I gave up my license. I chose you." He stared at me, his wrench clattering to the floor. "You? What?" "I love you, Ethan," I said, stepping closer. "And I'm not letting you go. Not again." He shook his head, tears in his eyes. "You're an idiot, Liam Carter." "Maybe," I said, smiling. "But I'm your idiot." He laughed, a broken, beautiful sound. And then he was in my arms, kissing me like the world was ending and beginning all at once. We didn't have all the answers. My career was in limbo, and Ethan's wounds were still healing. But for the first time, we were facing it together. No walls. No secrets. Summer came to Portland, and with it, a new chapter. Ethan and I moved in together. A small apartment with a view of the river. It wasn't perfect, money was tight, and I was navigating a career change, teaching counseling workshops instead of practicing. But it was ours, and that was enough. Ethan's art took off, his sketches turning into murals around the city, vibrant bursts of color that told his story. He still volunteered at the youth center, helping kids find their own voices. I was proud of him, prouder than I'd ever been of anyone. We fought sometimes about money, about fear, about the ghosts of our pasts. But we always came back to each other, learning what it meant to love without walls. One evening, as we sat on our balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky pink, Ethan took my hand. "You taught me something. You know," he said, his voice soft. "What's that?" I asked, leaning into him. "Love isn't about being perfect," he said. "It's about being brave enough to show up, even when it's messy." I smiled, my heart full. "You taught me that too." We didn't have a fairy tale indigno grand gestures or perfect resolutions. But we had something better, a love built on honesty, courage, and the choice to keep showing up. Portland's rain still fell, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like home. And as I looked at Ethan, his hazel eyes reflecting the fading light, I knew I'd found mine. True love, I realized, wasn't about fixing someone or being fixed. It was about seeing each other, really seeing and choosing to stay, no matter what. Ethan had been my patient, my challenge, my heart. And in the end, he'd taught me what true love really means.